I still remember the day my life took a drastic turn, one that would lead me down a rabbit hole of terror and confusion. It started with an innocent curiosity, a morbid fascination with the unknown, and an unrelenting need to uncover the truth behind one of the most infamous urban legends of our time, Bloody Mary. They say she's a harbinger of doom, a vengeful spirit who appears in mirrors when you summon her by name 3 times, face to face, under the light of a specific moon phase. I never believed it, of course. Not really. Growing up, I always thought Bloody Mary was just a silly myth, a cautionary tale meant to scare kids into behaving. But as I grew older, my interest in the supernatural only deepened, and I began to wonder what lay beyond the veil of reality. Was there truth to the legend, or was it nothing more than a product of our collective imagination? The answer would soon become all too clear. I recall spending countless hours scouring the internet for information on Bloody Mary, poring over articles and forums, talking to fellow enthusiasts and skeptics alike. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an obscure blog post by a self-proclaimed expert that my journey truly began. The blogger claimed to have spent years studying the phenomenon of Bloody Mary, delving deep into the world of occultism and paranormal activity. According to him, Bloody Mary was more than just a legend. She was a doorway to a realm of unspeakable terror. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was all just a bunch of hooey. But as I read on, something about the blogger's words resonated with me. Maybe it was the way he spoke of Bloody Mary as if she were a real entity, one that could be summoned and manipulated. Or maybe it was the sense of foreboding that hung over his every sentence like a shroud. Whatever the reason, I found myself becoming increasingly obsessed with the idea of meeting Bloody Mary firsthand. It's funny, looking back on it now, how naive I was, how blind to the horrors that lay ahead. But I won't lie, there's something about the darkness that draws you in, something that makes you feel like you're teetering on the edge of sanity. And so, with a sense of trepidation and anticipation, I began my journey into the heart of chilling cosmos. I spent hours scouring the internet for any information on Bloody Mary's origins. The blogger's blog post had been a good starting point, but I knew there was more to uncover. I delved into ancient mythology and folklore, searching for any mention of a figure similar to Bloody Mary. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an obscure text written by a medieval scholar that the pieces began to fall into place. The text, penned in the 14th century, spoke of a female entity known only as Mortua, a being with the power to manipulate the veil between life and death. According to the scholar, Mortua was born from the darkness of human souls, forged in the depths of our collective fears. As I read on, I began to notice a disturbing pattern. Mortua's origins seemed to be tied to an ancient ritual, one that involved the summoning of a powerful entity known as the Devourer. The ritual was said to have been performed by a secret society of occultists who believed that by calling upon the Devourer, they could tap into its power and bend reality to their will. But what caught my attention was the mention of a mirror. A mirror, passed down through generations of Mortua's followers, was said to hold the key to unlocking her true form. It was as if the mirror was a portal, a doorway to the very essence of Mortua's being. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than just an urban legend. Bloody Mary wasn't just a figure. She was a manifestation of humanity's darkest fears, a symbol of our own mortality. And I knew that I had to find out more. I had always been skeptical of the whole Bloody Mary thing, but as I stood in front of my old mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The lights in my apartment seemed to flicker, and the air was thick with an unsettling energy. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down, but it was no use. I knew what I had to do. I stared into the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel my pulse echoing through the glass, like a dark rhythm calling out to something within. And then I said it 3 times just as the blogger had instructed. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. At first there was nothing, just the echo of my own voice bouncing off the walls. But then I saw her. A presence coalesced in front of me, a dark and malevolent force that seemed to fill the entire mirror. Her eyes were black as coal, empty and devoid of any humanity. She reached out a bony hand, beckoning me closer. I tried to step back, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. I was transfixed by her gaze, unable to look away even as my mind screamed in terror. She began to speak, her voice like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. "You should not have come here," she hissed. "Now you'll never leave." I tried to run, but it was too late. The mirror seemed to ripple and distort, like water on a hot summer day. And then I felt myself being pulled towards it, sucked into a vortex of darkness that threatened to consume me whole. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The mirror was shattered, its glass scattered all over the room like broken shards of 1,000 tiny mirrors. And in the center of the mess, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a message scrawled across the wall, written in red letters. "I'm waiting for you." I stumbled upon an old book in the attic of my apartment building, bound in worn leather and adorned with strange symbols. As I flipped through its yellowed pages, I discovered that it was a diary belonging to one of the original occultists who had performed the ritual to summon Mortua's power. The entries were cryptic, but one passage caught my eye. "The mirror is not just a portal, it is a key." I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a metaphor. I began to scour the internet for any mention of mirrors being used in occult rituals, and what I found sent chills down my spine. There were countless accounts of people using mirrors to summon entities, often with disastrous consequences. I started to feel like I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, with Bloody Mary lurking around every corner. But it wasn't just the supernatural occurrences that unsettled me. It was the realization that I had become obsessed with this phenomenon. I was spending more and more time researching, poring over ancient texts, and seeking out other enthusiasts who shared my fascination. I met someone online who claimed to be an expert on Bloody Mary. They agreed to meet me in person, and I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as I arranged the encounter. As I waited for them to arrive, I couldn't help but wonder if this was all just a ruse, if they were using me for their own gain. I heard a knock at the door, and my heart skipped a beat as I opened it to find a woman with piercing green eyes. She smiled, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "You're quite the enthusiast," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I've been watching you." I tried to brush it off, but I knew I was in trouble. This woman seemed to know more about me than I did myself. I asked her who she was and what she wanted, but she just laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent chills down my spine. "Let's just say we share a common interest," she said, "and I'm here to take you on a journey." I knew then that I had stumbled into something much bigger than myself, something sinister. And I was ready to follow her into the depths of madness, no matter where it led. As the days passed, I found myself becoming more and more entrenched in the world of Bloody Mary. The woman who had met me online, whose name was Emily, seemed to be leading me on a wild goose chase through the depths of the internet. We spent hours poring over ancient texts, watching videos, and sharing stories of our own encounters with the legendary entity. Increasingly, I began to feel like I was losing myself in this world. My friends and family grew concerned, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more out there for me. Emily seemed to sense my unease, and she took it upon herself to draw me deeper into the mystery. I started to notice strange occurrences around me, symbols etched into walls, strange noises in the night, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. It was as if Bloody Mary was growing bolder, more confident in her presence, and I was starting to feel like I was a part of it, like I was being drawn into some dark and ancient ritual. I began to share my experiences with others, hoping to find some kind of connection or understanding. But the more I spoke about it, the more isolated I felt. People would nod and smile, but they didn't truly believe me. They thought I was crazy, that I had somehow stumbled upon a weird internet meme. But I knew what I had seen, what I had felt, and I knew that Bloody Mary was real. I started to feel like I was living in a dream world, where the boundaries between reality and fantasy were blurred beyond recognition. Emily seemed to be leading me down this path, guiding me towards some kind of revelation or awakening. But at what cost? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing with fire, that I was tampering with forces beyond my control. And yet, I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to the darkness like a moth to a flame. I started to notice strange changes in Emily herself. She seemed more confident, more assured, as if she knew some secret that I didn't. Her eyes took on a new intensity, a spark of excitement that made me feel like I was being pulled into something incredible. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than myself, something that threatened to consume me whole. And yet, I couldn't help but feel drawn to it, like a ship to a rocky shore. I had been planning this expedition for months. Emily and I were going to explore the long-abandoned, chilling Cosmos amusement park, rumored to be one of the most haunted places in the country. We packed our gear, grabbed our cameras, and set off into the darkness. As we made our way through the deserted streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The wind howled through the empty corridors like a chorus of restless spirits. Suddenly, Emily stopped dead in her tracks. "What is it?" I asked, but she just pointed to something ahead. I followed her gaze and my blood ran cold. The rickety old roller coaster that dominated the park center seemed to be moving. The wooden beams creaked and groaned as if the carriages were climbing back up the track. I felt a chill run down my spine. "This is insane," I whispered, but Emily just smiled. She took my hand and we walked towards the coaster, our hearts pounding in unison. As we approached, the movement slowed and then stopped. The coaster's carriages came to rest at the top of the track, as if waiting for us. Emily pulled me close, her eyes shining with excitement. "We're here," she whispered. And then, without warning, the coaster lurches back into life. The cars began to move, rolling slowly down the track like a procession of ghostly specters. We watched in horror as they climbed higher and higher until they reached the top of the hill. There, they came to rest once more, their carriages frozen in place. But it was what happened next that made my blood run cold. The coaster's seats began to fill with people, not just any people, but our friends and family back home. They were all smiling and laughing as if enjoying the ride of a lifetime. And then they started to disappear one by one until only Emily was left. She looked at me, her eyes wild with fear. "We have to get out of here," she whispered. But it was too late. The coaster's seats were now empty, but the cars themselves were still moving. They continued to climb higher and higher until they reached the very top of the hill. And then, in an instant, they vanished into thin air. We were left standing alone, surrounded by an eerie silence. I turned to Emily, my heart racing with fear. "What just happened?" I asked, but she just shook her head. She knew that we had crossed a boundary, one from which there was no return. and as the darkness closed in around us, I realized that we were trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the desecration at chilling Cosmos. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling from the events at chilling Cosmos. But as I turned to flee, I saw Emily's eyes snap open like a trapdoor. Her pupils expanded, and her skin took on an eerie sheen. She rose from the ground, her body beginning to twist and contort in ways that seemed impossible for human flesh. Her mouth opened, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, and a voice like thunder boomed forth. "The time of reckoning is upon us." I tried to run, but my legs were rooted to the spot. The air around Emily began to distort, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate her transformation. She grew taller, her body elongating into a sinuous, serpentine form. Her skin shimmered with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel the power of the entity coursing through her veins. I knew then that we were facing something truly ancient, something that defied human comprehension. The entity, known only as the Devourer, had awoken from its slumber, and it was hungry. Emily's body began to writhe and twist, her limbs merging into a single, pulsing mass of flesh and energy. Her face elongated, her features distending into a grotesque parody of humanity. The voice that had once been hers now raged with an otherworldly fury. "You should not have come here," it growled. "You will not leave." I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The Devourer's power seemed to be suffocating me, crushing the air from my lungs. And then, in an instant, everything went black. I was consumed by a vortex of darkness, torn from the world above and hurled into the abyssal void beyond. I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of terror. The darkness seemed to writhe and twist around me, alive with an otherworldly presence that fed on my sanity. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the void. Every step felt like a weighty burden, as if the very ground beneath my feet was conspiring against me. Emily's face haunted me, her eyes black as coal, her skin gray and decaying. She spoke to me in hushed tones, her words dripping with malevolence. "You should have stayed hidden." I stumbled through a desolate landscape, searching for an escape from the nightmare that had become my reality. But every door led only to more darkness, more terrors. The air was thick with an unclean scent, like rot and decay. I knew then that I was being driven mad by the Devourer's influence. My grip on reality was tenuous at best, and with each passing moment, it seemed to slip further away. The nightmares were relentless, a never-ending barrage of horrors that threatened to consume me whole. I saw myself trapped in a hall of mirrors, reflections stretching out in every direction like a maze of broken glass. I heard the whispers of my own name, echoing through the void like a curse. And then there was the figure in the shadows, a presence that watched me with cold, calculating eyes. It moved closer, its face a twisted mockery of humanity. "You will never escape," it hissed. "You will never be free." I was lost in a world of madness, where the laws of physics were but a distant memory and reality was nothing more than a fragile illusion. I stumbled through the darkened streets, my mind reeling from the horrors that had been unleashed upon me. I had to find a way out of this living nightmare, but every door led only to more terrors. The Devourer's influence seemed to seep into every pore of my being, threatening to consume me whole. But I refused to give up. I had to know the truth about what was happening to me, and why Emily had been transformed into a monstrous creature. I found myself back at chilling Cosmos, standing in front of the abandoned funhouse. The building seemed to loom over me, its walls covered in a thick layer of grime and decay. I knew that I had to face whatever horrors lay within if I wanted to ever escape. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with the stench of rot and decay, and I could feel the weight of the Devourer's presence bearing down upon me. But I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. I navigated through the darkened corridors, avoiding the twisted statues and macabre decorations that seemed to leer at me from every direction. Finally, I came to a door hidden behind a tattered curtain. It was locked, but I knew that I had to try and open it. I examined the lock closely, searching for any weaknesses or vulnerabilities. And then, in a flash of inspiration, I saw my chance. I quickly worked on opening the lock, my fingers trembling with anticipation. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with ancient artifacts and forbidden knowledge. In the center of the room, I found a large, leather-bound book. It was bound with black straps and adorned with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and twist in the dim light. I knew that this must be the source of the Devourer's power and the key to unlocking its secrets. I opened the book, and a musty smell wafted up from the pages. As I began to read, I realized that the book was a diary written by Emily herself. She had been investigating the Devourer for years, trying to uncover the truth about this ancient entity. But as she delved deeper into her research, she became increasingly obsessed with the creature, and eventually it consumed her. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the final entry in the diary. Emily had discovered that the Devourer was not just an entity. It was a doorway to other dimensions, a portal to realms beyond our own. And she had inadvertently opened it, unleashing a horror beyond human comprehension upon the world. I knew then that I had to destroy the book and whatever power it contained. But as I reached for the diary, I felt a presence behind me. The Devourer had followed me into this room, its power coursing through my veins like liquid fire. I turned to face it, my heart pounding in my chest. And that was when I saw the truth. The Devourer was not just an entity, but a reflection of myself. It was the darkest aspect of my own psyche, the part of me that had always been afraid of the unknown. I realized then that I had been the one who had unleashed this horror upon the world, and that I was the only one who could stop it. I knew that I had to confront the darkness within myself if I wanted to defeat the Devourer. So I decided to face my fears and summon Bloody Mary, the legendary spirit of vengeance. I had heard the stories, the whispers of a ghostly figure who would appear in mirrors, exacting a deadly revenge on those who dared to look into her eyes. But I was not afraid. I was determined to put an end to the Devourer's reign of terror once and for all. I found myself standing in front of an old, rusty mirror, its surface clouded with dust and grime. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I gazed into the glass, wondering if Bloody Mary would indeed appear before me. But then, I took a deep breath and began to speak the words that had been passed down through generations. Bloody Mary, come out to play. The air around me seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening as if something was stirring in the darkness. And then, suddenly, the mirror began to rattle and shake. The glass seemed to ripple and distort, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. I felt a presence behind me, a cold breath on the back of my neck. I turned to face it, and that was when I saw her Bloody Mary standing just beyond the mirror's edge. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, her skin deathly pale, her hair a wild tangle of black locks. She smiled at me, a cold, mirthless smile, and began to walk towards me, her movements slow and deliberate. I knew then that I was in grave danger, that Bloody Mary was not here to play games with me. But I stood my ground, determined to face whatever horrors lay before me. As she drew closer, I could feel the air grow colder still, the shadows deepening into darkness. And then, suddenly, Bloody Mary vanished, leaving me staring at her reflection in the mirror. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. the Devourer's face staring back at me from the glass. It was a twisted mockery of my own visage, a grotesque parody of my own features. I knew then that I had been wrong all along. Bloody Mary was not just a spirit of vengeance, but a doorway to another realm, a portal to the Devourer's domain. And as I stumbled backward, I realized that I was in even greater danger than before. The Devourer had claimed me, body and soul, and now it was time for us to face each other once and for all. As I stood there, frozen in terror, the Devourer's face seemed to stretch and contort, its features blurring together like a painting smeared by a wet brush. The mirror behind it began to ripple and distort, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. And then, without warning, the glass shattered, sending shards of glass flying in all directions. I felt a searing pain in my eyes, as if something was burning within them. I tried to look away, but it was too late. The Devourer's face was now superimposed over my own, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. I felt my mind begin to unravel, threads of sanity snapping like brittle twigs. The world around me began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet as I desperately tried to escape the madness that was consuming me. But it was too late. The Devourer's presence had already seeped into my mind, infecting me with its own twisted logic. I felt myself becoming a vessel for its malevolent will, my thoughts and emotions twisted into grotesque parodies of themselves. I was no longer in control, but rather a puppet dancing on the strings of the Devourer's dark magic. As the madness deepened, I began to see visions of the past and present colliding in a maelstrom of terror. I saw myself as a child, cowering in fear as my parents argued in hushed tones. I saw my friends and loved ones, their faces twisted into grotesque grins as they laughed maniacally. And I saw the Devourer itself, its form shifting and flowing like a liquid as it whispered sweet nothings in my ear. "You are mine now," it hissed. "You will do my bidding." And with that, the world went dark, consumed by an abyss of madness from which I knew I would never escape. I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, unable to escape the clutches of the Devourer. My mind was a jumble of twisted thoughts and emotions, my senses overwhelmed by the constant barrage of terror. Every moment felt like an eternity, each second stretching out into an interminable crawl of fear. I was at the mercy of the Devourer, forced to endure its whims and fancies without respite. It toyed with me, tantalizing me with promises of escape before snatching them away like a cruel joke. I was lost in a labyrinth of madness, unable to find my way out of the twisted corridors of my own mind. And yet, even as I screamed and begged for mercy, the Devourer only laughed, its voice echoing through the void like a chorus of the damned. It was the embodiment of all my deepest fears, the manifestation of every terror that had ever haunted me, and it would never let me go. As the days blended together into an endless blur of fear and despair, I began to lose all sense of time. The world outside receded into obscurity, a distant memory that might as well have been a dream. All that remained was the Devourer, its presence suffocating me with an unending weight of terror. I was trapped in a living hell, unable to escape the clutches of this monstrous entity. And yet, even as I screamed and begged for mercy, I knew that I would never be free. For in the Devourer's world, there was no escape from the eternal horror that lurked within its twisted heart. It was a realm without end or beginning, a never-ending cycle of terror that would haunt me forever.